Today, I wanted to talk about models of care during pregnancy, and specifically about looking at the differences between the midwifery model of care and then the kind of medical model or Western medical model. So, in the West, it's very commonly assumed that if someone gets pregnant, they go and find their OBGYN, they find their doctor if they don't already have one, and they go through the pregnancy working with their OB. And then on delivery day, they go to the hospital and the baby comes. Now, that's totally a possibility, and that's primarily what most people do. But I really wanted to bring up the fact that that's not the only way to do pregnancy and birth. For some people, there are tons of reasons why that's the best avenue, the best journey. But again, it's not the only choice. And it's easy to forget in the excitement or the worries around pregnancy that there are choices and there are multiple options at play. So, OBs or obstetricians are medically trained professionals who are able to manage the care of pregnancy, birth, and they also have been trained with the surgical skills to do often life saving procedures such as cesarean births. Then there's another type of care provider called a midwife. And midwives are also medically trained, certified nurse midwives are medically trained professionals that also are able to manage the care of pregnancy and birth. The only difference being that they are not medically trained or certified to perform surgeries, so they don't have the knife skills. However, they are fully equipped and competent with all of the kind of major components, medical and non medical, as it relates to pregnancy and delivery and beyond. And in the Western medical model, typically this is the style of care that is more focused on what could go wrong, and the baby is actually the patient, even though the mother is the one that is attending the doctor's visits. And so, oftentimes, appointments, although they typically are quite short in duration, this is the time where women are told about the prenatal vitamins to take or the foods to avoid or things that are going to be impacting the baby, and then potentially a little bit of time to answer other questions, but that's pretty much it. And then with a midwifery model of care, the care is really around both the baby and the mother, kind of in a dual sort of focus. And typically, midwives reserve a much larger chunk of time, unless they're employed within a hospital, in which case the hospital system might mandate time limits to appointments. But typically, they're allocating more time to talk about not just what to do for the baby, but also how is the pregnancy going for the mother? How is she feeling physically? How is she feeling emotionally? What's coming up for her? What might she expect in the next couple of weeks? There's a lot more kind of holistically minded conversation and a lot more of a I guess I would say a camaraderie. With most obstetricians, there's a very traditional and clear structure. The doctor is the doctor, and the woman slash the baby is the patient. It's more of a feeling of kind of a hierarchy. I'm going to tell you what needs to be done. Here is the way. Make sure you're doing this and you're not doing that. And there's more kind of parameters that I feel are set. With midwifery model, it feels a little bit more like the midwife and the parent are kind of coming together on an equal playing field. There's more of this sense of we're all in it together. There's the assumption that birth is a natural process, that it's not a restriction, it's not an illness, it's not a disability, that being pregnant is a part of life, and that a woman's body is designed to do it, to grow a baby, to have a baby. And that doesn't mean that it is a hands off journey by any means. There's a lot of guidance and educating involved. But that's really the key word, I would say, when it comes to the midwifery model. There's way more education and collaboration. Whereas I find that in the Western medical model, there's way more prescription and kind of informing what is needed to get the patient to do what the patient needs to do, if that makes sense. And so what I really want to bring forward is that within both of these models, there's every kind of person you might fall on the spectrum of warm and open and connecting and inviting, all the way to cold and distant. So that's, something that the personality of the care provider will come through no matter what they've chosen to do professionally. But really what I'm curious about is, as I explain these two different styles of care, which one makes you feel safer? Which one makes you feel more taken care of? Which one makes you feel more involved? And for every person, they will have a different answer. There's no better or worse, right or wrong. There's just a choice. When you hire an OB or a midwife to care for you and your baby, to care for the pregnancy, you're doing exactly that. You are hiring someone to care for you, which means that you're not just the patient or the pregnant woman. You are the boss. You are the customer. And so you have choice, and you can really go with what makes sense for you and what makes you feel good in your pregnancy. You are not the victim, you are not the lesser. You don't need to feel like you owe your doctor or midwife anything. This is a relationship that is a mutually engaged experience. And if you find that and by the way, whether you're choosing either model or you're looking between the two of them, I highly recommend that you do go forward and kind of treat the first visit or first couple of visits as, in some ways, almost like an interview, where you can really make sure that you're on the same page and that you have similar alignment in visions or practices around the pregnancy and birth, especially around the topic of intervention. Typically, Western medical model is a much higher intervention model, meaning that especially during labor and delivery, if labor isn't progressing at the rate that the doctor decides is the right rate, maybe some sort of medical intervention in the form of, for example, taking Pitocin, which is a synthetic form of oxytocin and kind of speeds things up, will be brought up. If the pushing stage is not happening in the way that the OB sees as being the kind of right or necessary way, perhaps there's more of the introduction of something like the episiotomy or the transferring to get a cesarean, to get a C-section or cesarean birth. And again, for some people that makes them feel really safe. For other people, they don't like that thought. And so kind of interviewing early on and getting a sense of what the OB or midwife feels comfortable with is really important. For example, when I kind of have seen many different providers over the course of my 2 pregnancies as I've moved across countries and felt comfortable or not felt comfortable with certain people. When I first got to the United States during my first pregnancy, I went to go see an OBGYN, and I really loved her personality, and I thought she was a great potential fit because we had good chemistry, and um, I was newly returning to the States, and so that just felt more safe and comfortable to me. And what I found was over the course of the first couple of appointments, as I would ask questions like, oh, what's your rate of episiotomy? How many C-sections do you normally do? What is the labor and delivery nurse staff like? Are you okay if I push in different positions? Like, can I go on my hands and knees? Can I walk around during labor? And her responses to my questions didn't align with my vision of having a very low intervention, very natural, very free movement kind of birth experience. And so I really liked her as a person. I thought she was going to provide great care, but she didn't offer the service that I was hiring a care provider for. So I switched providers. And sometimes we feel like this sense of almost obligation if we start working with a provider, or this sense of like, oh well, they know me, or I'm so lucky to have someone, or this or this and this, and that's normal to feel those things. And it's also important to remember that you are the boss and that you have the right to switch care providers if that person doesn't line up with what you want or need out of your experience. um, and sometimes we don't come to that realization until the very end of the pregnancy. And that's when it does get more tough to make a change, as opposed to earlier on. It's typically easier to make a switch. But it's never too late is the kind of underlying message. And it's always possible to explore different options. So if you haven't before considered it, trying to work with an OB or trying to work with a midwife, or exploring what that might look like, hopefully this is an invitation for you to ask, what do I want my pregnancy experience to be like? And how do I feel when I'm in appointments with my care provider? And what are my other options? When I work with my doula clients, I often ask the simple question of any procedure or choice at hand of what are the benefits, what are the risks, and what are the alternatives. And that's the same kind of mentality that we get to look at when choosing one of the most important relationships of the pregnancy, which is that of the person that's really going to be taking care of us and our babies. So I'd love to hear what you have to think about that, about your own experiences, if you've tried the different models. And yeah, thank you for taking the time to listen in.